Hi, this is Frank Rodriguez Villela, and I'm here and honored to be with, I consider a great friend of mine. I want to introduce Mr. Tim Pierce, who has been, to me, one of the really important people when it comes down to the things happening right now with guitar education. And since I do guitar education and I'm starting a real basic class, I thought Tim would be the best person to have as my first guest on my channel. So I would like to introduce Tim Pierce. And I'm really, it's sort of funny because I came here and I moved to LA in '79. And I think you moved here in '79.
Exactly.
And I think it's interesting that we never met. And we know a few friends that know, I guess, like Matt Bissonette and Greg, and so we always sort of worked in different circles. And when I moved out here, I was mainly on the west side though. I lived like Olympic and Fairfax area, where all the nice little bagel shops were. So it was very. But when I moved to LA, I really moved to study, to get a teacher, you know. And I knew you were here around that same time, and I know a lot of the stuff that's happened in your career, and I'm so excited to get to meet you and talk with you. And but I want to know a little bit of what I want to know the Tim Pierce before he came to LA. I want to know the Tim Pierce that was in New Mexico, right? New Mexico,
yeah,
in New Mexico. Yeah. But there's certain things that I don't know about you when you were what was your education and stuff, like teachers and who you studied with and what brought you to LA. Not the LA stuff.
Sure,
I sort of know the LA.
Yeah. So I have very, very little education, and it was always something that was difficult for me when I would show up in a room with guys like Greg Fillinganes and Nathan East and people who were incredible schooled people, because LA is an environment where the best musician from everywhere moves. So it's not local, it's not regional, it's not national, it's international. So the guy who went to the best music school in London ends up moving here and working here, and then I would end up in a room with that guy, and I had no education. It was always a hard thing. So I wish I had gone to music school, but I did have a great music teacher for a couple of years. I was born in '58, and New Mexico is a really beautiful desert community. The sky and the weather and the geography are pretty inspiring. Grew up next to an Air Force base, and being born in '58, by about 1961, when I was 3 years old, I started falling in love with the AM radio. So really my love of music comes from songs on top 40 radio. And that includes, you know, Peter, Paul and Mary, Otis Redding, you know, early 60s Beatles, Glenn Campbell, you know, just great songwriting. Anything, The Fifth Dimension, The Monkees, I mean, endless great songs, Three Dog Night, right. Endless great songs and great records on the AM radio. And then by the time I was, say, 10 years old, that would have been 1968. And then you have Hendrix, you have Led Zeppelin. It's just crazy that I was able to fall in love with music at that time. I feel very lucky about that because that's my DNA. So, and it was the guitar, but more than that, it was songs. And then it became the guitar a little later. So I had 2 years of lessons from the age of 12 to 14. Oh. So a half hour a week for 2 years, I studied with a guitar teacher. That's it. So I have almost no musical education whatsoever. I learned enough to know the modes and how to play over the songs and the music that I love. I cannot play jazz. I cannot play classical, but it was never an interest. I enjoy hearing jazz that's simple. Mm-hmm. I always loved simple music. I love it more than ever today. Oh, yes. It's you know, 2 chords, 3 chords, 4 chords, 5 chords.
Or 1 chord.
Sure. Yeah. So what happened to me was I was playing in bands starting at the age of 14, and you know, the classic story where they were sneaking me into nightclubs and bars. And I graduated high school in 1976, and I started playing in bars, and it was kind of depressing. It was kind of a dead end. I really wanted to do something with music, but it wasn't an environment where you could really have a career there. So in 1979, my mom gave me her car, an old Pontiac, and my parents gave me $2,000. And now I made a living prior to that. I started making my own money when I was 14. So it wasn't like I was, you know, I had a job and made money and bought my own clothes and bought my own guitars and stuff from the age of 14 to, you know, when I left, when I was right before I turned 21. But they gave me a boost to move to LA.
Very similar. The parents did the same.
Okay, great.
I got a 75 VW Rabbit. And that's how I moved out.
Yeah.
I moved out here with all my vinyl. So so was that was the time.
Yeah, right? So I moved here at the end of 79, and I knocked around. LA at that time was a very wide open, nurturing, it was actually kind of a welcoming place. Now, that being said, when I first moved here, I was sick to my stomach every morning because I was intimidated by the size of it and how much was going on. And then you start to see how many great guitar players were everywhere. It's like I would meet one great guitar player after another who could do everything. Yeah. Like, and I thought I could do everything because you grow up in a small town, you get a little bit of I can do that. I can do it, and you really can't. So, you know, it seemed like everybody had Steve Lukather chops at that point. It was pretty amazing. And then Van Halen had just broken, and then everybody had Van Halen chops, and it was pretty intimidating. But I started doing gigs and showcases and little paid gigs. I would get the recycler and do a $30 rehearsal and a $50 gig. So in that sense, LA was actually open and welcoming. You could kind of be anybody.
It was a good time.
And it was actually affordable too. I rented a house with a couple of guys for $700, so my nut on the house was $233 a month. It was, you know, but there was a point which was really amazing where after I'd been here maybe 8 or 9 months, I was able to keep a $700 balance in my checking account and pay my bills and start to buy gear. And I thought, oh, I'm actually making it. I'm getting by. It's working. So, you know, you can ask anything else you want to fill in the blanks, but that's pretty much the story of what got me here. I hit a dead end in a small town, you know, and I wanted to do more. And you know what it was? I had a friend who moved out here too. Sometimes I have friends who do stuff and I go, oh, I can't miss out. My friend Kirk moved here in August and I moved out here in September. So it was like, okay, if he can do it, I can do it.
Oh,
so
that's great.
My
parents about the same time. I was there September of 79.
Yeah, exactly.
So we probably passed each other on the road. But you mentioned the teacher. You mentioned like he only had like 2 years, right? Okay, so that teacher, and you said about the modes and stuff like that. But did he do something to, you know, so you just worked on music, worked on tunes that you liked and said, hey, I like that? Well,
it's hard to describe. He was a mentor too. I ended up being in a band with him actually later in my teens. Oh, cool. So he was a mentor to me the whole time. Yeah. And he was the kind of teacher that would ask you how you were doing, and you know, he was a very caring human being. He went on to teach. He passed away, but he went on to teach a lot of people for the rest of his life in Albuquerque, and he was incredibly loved and valued, and he was a great teacher. But you know, it could be anything. You know, you know how it is. It's like one week it might be an Emerson, Lake and Palmer song. The next week it might be learning the national number system. You know, it was. And it was a thing where he would ask you. You would ask him, well, okay, what chord is he doing there? It was that kind of thing? I don't really remember those kinds of details, but I remember the stuff he threw at me, you know, basically. I don't remember what I was asking for. I knew what I loved at that time, which was Cream and Hendrix. And you see, that's absolutely everything. You know, for a while, I mean, as a teacher, I would say, well, no, you gotta do this. This is the important part. And now that since I'm teaching in a program where people, no, I just want to learn how to do that. How is this? And so lots of times I feel, you know, as teachers, we just sort of listening, and lots of times we're like, you know, in the beginning I was, no, don't use your thumb, dude, don't use your thumb. But it ends up being, no, that's what really works, and you can control it and make it work, you make it work. And so our teachers are important, and I was lucky enough to be here, I think last year, when you were doing a class, and I just happened to be here, and I got to hear you talk to a student. It was very inspiring. Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah, because I mean, I saw that, and you mentioned stuff about, I'm not going to go too much into it, but you just said things that were so inspiring.
Oh, great.
To that student. That was so awesome, and you did it. You know, I think it was a Skype call. I guess I remember. But at that point, I said, "Oh, Tim's a great teacher."
Oh, thank you.
Because that kind of thing, that kind of interaction to me was so important. And so I was just really curious because he did mention something about there was a thing where he wasn't too sure of his notes on the actual keyboard. And I'm going, and then you were just so humble, and you explained, well, you need to do this, and you were trying to say, go to your neighborhood teacher type of thing, which is the stuff you got to do, you know. And obviously, wherever we are, we find those people, we find them, we look. And so here, when you moved here after, you know, I guess your parents gave you that vehicle and you came out here, did you seek a teacher, or did you just want to play?
No, I tried to take sight reading lessons at Dick Grove, but I just didn't have the self-discipline to continue. You know, I went 2 or 3 times and then just stopped going. But the thing I really wanted to do was work, and that was on. When I moved here, I started learning more than I ever had, but it was from being in situations where I had to come up with parts and sounds for songs, and learning from other guitar players how they came up with parts and sounds for songs, how to fit into an ensemble. So the learning, there wasn't a teacher, but the environment was the teacher, and the job was the teacher, because you had to step up and learn how to fit into these songs and get the sounds and get the parts and get them quickly and learn quickly and execute quickly and be nice and show up on time and all the stuff that a professional... That was the learning. The music, because I loved simple music, it wasn't necessary for me to keep learning more complex forms, although I regret not, learning more complex forms. I actually am not a great finger picker, and I wish I had learned to do that. Kind of learning a little bit now, but so there are big gaps, but the job taught me.
Yeah, because I picked that up when you were talking, and I think it was a thing with Rick Beato, and you mentioned something, and it sounded like you were, I'm not late. I think you called them a college student. I mean, what do you call them? Professors of music and guitarists. It was that kind of word, and I loved it because I'm going like, I sort of grew up in that. My dad wouldn't let me do guitar unless I had a teacher. And then I went to a school that demanded that you be a good reader, and we're all like 12 years old, 13. So it's something we did. And I thought, that was sort of part of what the LA scene was. The LA, you got to be able to do that because of Tommy Tedesco and all that. But the funny thing is, when I came out here, I was trying to stay in Texas. I wasn't even thinking of coming to LA. I just wanted to stay in Texas. There was a teacher I wanted to be there with. But he passed away suddenly, and next thing I know, I'm talking to a guy named Jack Peterson in North Texas. And he was recommended to me by a guy named John Abercrombie, a really great jazz guitar player in New York. He said, oh man, we happened to meet, and he talked about him. But I couldn't get into a school. So I came up here with the idea of just, since I couldn't get into that school, I came in to see, he said, there's a guy in LA, his name is Tony Risi. He knows everything I do. So I went in that direction. So my direction was more where shows, everybody throws charts, and they got to hear it in in 10 seconds. We got to, sometimes no rehearsals, So that's what I thought the life for me was going to be here. And, but I didn't, there's that other world that sort of, and I envy it because it's so creative. What y'all were doing and the stuff you did was like something where it's the simplicity part of it. And sometimes the simplicity can be just as incredibly difficult as the complicated,
It's all everybody has a different DNA and a different reason for loving and doing music. And like I said, I keep going back to it. Mine was simple songs on the radio in the 60s. So that's where I wanted to live. And that's a lot simpler than what a lot of guitar players and a lot of musicians crave in their minute by minute, hour by hour, day-to-day lives. So I never craved that. I like the simplest forms of music and the simplest, and of course I love the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I love Steely Dan. I love Earth, Wind and Fire. So I love that music, and I became somewhat capable of sort of playing some of that music, but not as good as the guys who did study and the guys who did go to school and who came from a jazz background. If you come from a jazz education background, then you're much more able to jump into a Steely Dan song Like there have been gigs that I've been offered sessions where I had a guy come over here with a beautiful song that was very Steely Dan-like, and I actually fired myself and I said, I'm going to give you Dean Parks' number, and you're going to go over there, and you're not going to pay me. And he was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I think I did the solo. I did a solo for him because that I could put together. But all these rhythm parts over these chords, he'll do that for you just like that. And this will be a struggle for me, and you don't want that. Yeah, so you have to cast yourself where you're best. And luckily, music got very simple in the 90s, and that's when I started working the most as a studio musician. And my job,
in the 90s, huh?
The job of a guitar player is to orchestrate. Not as much right now because there's less guitar on songs, although there are some songs now that are orchestrated with guitar, but it's to come up with the 12 or 15 parts that fill all the spectrum, Yeah. And you're an orchestrator, and in my particular case, I was writing those parts either by myself or in collaboration with the people in the room. So reading was not the job.
Yeah, it was creative.
The job was coming up with some things that would make their songs, transform their songs, into a dream come true.
Right. So when you say Dean Parks, so Dean Parks is, I think he was also a North Texas guy. I think he went to school with a friend of mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I was gonna, would he be a person that you go, oh, Dean, you could, was he a person you would learn from on dates? Did you ever get to work with him on any dates?
Dean and I have done sessions together for 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, oh, that's awesome. So you knew about him before you even came?
Oh, totally,
here? Yeah. I mean, I know that's just one of the things that people coming into LA, sort of who the cats are, Carlton or Dean Parks, the guy named George Derry. George. Yeah, he's an awesome player.
When you move here, or even when you're any fan of music, like I looked at the names on records constantly when I was in New Mexico. So I knew all the names of all the musicians, and then I came here and gradually I started meeting them all. And it's like I was more, excited about meeting David Foster than I was excited about meeting, Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
oh yeah, yes.
It's like the producers and the engineers and the songwriters and the musicians were the stars to me. So it was like, yeah, I met Dean. The first time I met Dean, he actually, I was selling some gear in the recycler, and he showed up in my garage to buy a couple of Fender cabinets. I went, ooh. But then we started doing sessions together. I've done 100, if not more, sessions with Dean. Yeah.
And he's he seems like I knew his friend, and they're actually, the funny thing, they're very
We do the
similar.
Grammys together, too. They canceled it this year, but we do that. If you look at my Grammy videos on my channel, it's he and I. We're the guitar players.
The player. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I know, and he's definitely one of the guys you would consider as those professor, guitarist, musician person.
Well, yeah, that's the opposite of me in a lot of ways, and we really appreciate each other. The thing is, Dean he's also, I think it's clarinet. His first instrument is clarinet, so he has this background I guess the story is in the jazz, in the 2 o'clock band he played guitar, and in the 5 o'clock band he played clarinet or whatever. He was just one of those guys as a youth. So he looks at music from this wealth of knowledge. And when James Taylor broke his hand, he hired Dean to come sit in and play all James Taylor's parts. I mean, it gets so deep with him.
Yeah, yes.
That's a level, I'm not in that league. I never was. I never will be. But that's the kind of musician who can do anything, anywhere, for anybody, reading, not reading.
Anytime, exactly.
It's just a different, it's just a different animal.
But it's a background. It's background.
Totally, yeah. And so he's all education. He's he's a bit of he's kind of a genius when it comes to technology stuff too. He's really deep about everything. Guy. It's not just music. You got to talk to him about computers and stuff. He goes very, very deep.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you ever get anybody through your programs or through the online that wants to know more basic things about the instrument?
Well,
does that make sense?
It does. It does. I've actually started a beginner course, and I'm going to debut it actually in the next couple of weeks, I think.
Oh, awesome.
Within the next month. I just wanted to get to about 100 videos before I debut it. And I could have not... I've been teaching for a little while. I'm becoming a better teacher. You're a better teacher than I am, and I'm not flattering you. But all the teachers I know basically do it better than me. I'm learning to be a teacher. It's kind of on-the-job training, which is how my session career was too.
Right.
On-the-job training. It's a lucky place to be. So I tried to teach beginner lessons 10 years ago when I first started the thing. I wasn't very good at it. And I just went into the intermediate level because I knew, I got some good advice, and I knew that those were the people that probably would be most interested in what I was doing, people that wanted to play up to my level, but that could already play. So I am teaching beginner content now, but I'm only doing it well because I've been teaching for 10 years. And what I'm trying to say is, even if I tried to do beginner work 3 years ago, wouldn't have been as good. I'm finally ready to actually teach beginning guitar. And the thing that I'm most aware of is we're in a world where, you can see when people drive, we're in a world where you press a button, you get everything. You get your food, you get your media, anything you want. It's just like tap, 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 tap. And playing a musical instrument is the opposite of that. It's hard, and it doesn't reward you at first. And you're extracting a tone out of something of wood and steel. So it requires a shift in your thinking if you're basically only used to clicking and getting what you want. And that's the beauty of it, but it's also the, deep breath. You have to be kind to yourself and be willing to fall flat on your face for a long time. Now, a long time means a lifetime, really, because it always, there's always tuning issues, there's timing issues. I go through it every day. There's repeating yourself issues. It's a discipline that's so different from our digital, instant gratification mentality. So really, it's almost like therapy. I mean, it's like you're allowing yourself to fail thousands of times and recover from that failure and get a little better at what you're doing. It's the same if you had to make your legs work again after an accident. Oh, yeah. It's an inch at a time, and that is what I'm most impressed about with this whole thing. And that's the most human thing about it, because if you can do that, then you can do anything in life. But so many of us, you can see when people drive, they come up behind you and they want to click their iPhone and make you disappear so that they can race past you. They don't want to stop at stop signs. You can just see it everywhere. The impatience of having, a touch screen and getting what you want.
It's global. It's a global thing.
Yeah, it is. So it's almost like physical therapy at this point, and it's the most human thing you can do is teach yourself to play an instrument, because it requires that fall down, get back up, fall down. Yeah. There's pain, there's uncertainty, there's...
Yeah, it's stop. You got to stop. Yeah. You got to stop and think. And people, that's a hard thing to do.
And there are setbacks while you gain ground. It's like this. As the curve goes upwards, it's like this. Like anything in life, anything worth.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's always important. All this stuff that's happening now with the programs, the classes, the online stuff, we're all learning. I know I'm learning. I don't know, and I don't know a lot about technology. I just don't know as much. And my friends will be the first ones to tell you. I have a great group that helps me. It's a little satellite shop, and it's called Pace Guitar, and they're both great guitarists, and his name is Boo. Boo is and he's the one that will help me set up instruments, and when I have too much, I give it to them, and I asked Boo. I said, Boo, I don't know. How about this? What do you think? I said, you're creating it. You're doing it. So just slow down and figure out what you're doing. And that was a very, it's people, and they're great people. They're always like, relax me. Because when you work on instruments, everything has to be slow. There's no fast things about it. You have to sit down, and I'm going, oh God, that fret is so rough. So there I am. I'm fighting a fret for because I play all right. I'm not a great player, but I can figure out things. My ears are good, and there's things where I can, when kids are in those situations, I'll teach them a song real quick. Like oh, mister, that song by the Chili Peppers? I said, which one is it? So we'll listen. That's why I bring my phone into the class, which is not permitted, but I still do it as just a music to help the class. And we can go through stuff. We do it, but we have to relax. We have to sit down. And I think that's something that's missing in life. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something that I hadn't really You know, we live in that environment where, yeah, it's what's it called, DoorDash, that where they come in and drop your food. You're just not. It's not. I mean, the pandemic has done a lot of stuff where, and also technology. There's no going back.
But at the same time, it's very important to keep the human side of it in the equation, because the human side of it is much slower learning. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful, but it almost becomes like therapy.
It does, right. And I feel that's how it is, even since I'm really not in the schools anymore. I don't teach at the college anymore. I don't take private students anymore. We were talking like our lives had changed. You said some great things, Tim. That's so awesome. I'm glad, glad you, because there were just such key things that people need to hear. And
well, you caught me at a good time. I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while. I'm getting a little better at it, and I believe in it, and I love teaching people. And it really, there might be 100 people who pick up the guitar, and there might be 10 that stick with it, and that's okay. But those 10 people that I'm looking for, and you are too, and it's a beautiful instrument. It's more popular than ever. The pandemic made the guitar crazy popular, so we're in a good line of work.
Good place right now. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel that way, and I feel that we are we're helping out.
Well, music, it can be whatever you want it to be, and it is one great experience alone. If you're by yourself making music, it's great. It's also great if you're making music with one other person. It's also great if you're in a room making it with 5 other people and there's a drummer and all that. It's also great if you're in a big band and there's, 30 people or 20 people. Right. Or in an orchestra with 60 to 90 people. So you make it up as you go along, and music can be whatever you want it to be. It can be, the guitar can be what you sing over. The guitar can be, so many things. Yeah, and you can design it to be whatever you want it to be. And that's the great thing about the new world, is you can really be yourself. Now, making a living at it is harder than it used to be. But even that, if you're willing, you really have to hustle and be an entrepreneur, right, in addition to a musician, if you want to make a living at it. And but if you love music, people just do it without even thinking about it.
Right. I think so. All righty. Well, thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being part of this. And Tim Pierce's link will be on this video. And if you have any questions, I also have a website where people can just submit if they have any questions, and I can always help you out as best as I can to direct you in whatever you might need for your music, or you just need somebody to talk to. That's something we do. So, all righty. Well, thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure.